cut to the holding page. Sweet. Apologies everyone. We had a technical difficulty there. And apologies to those who were on earlier. We're just going to catch up where we were, but I just wanted to quickly just backtrack and acknowledge the audience that have retuned in. Part of this residency is kind of embracing the unknown, leaning into the pain of the unknown, and live streaming is an interesting discipline, and we've had some great help recently to kind of get us set up in this space. So I'm currently in artist in residence for Massey University here in this beautiful space next to the Wellington waterfront, and we've got our production set up, but we've just kind of added live stream because of one of the components of this whole project is the educational aspect, which obviously COVID has thrown a spanner in the works of. And so we've accumulated a lot of really cool insights around creative production and the intersection with culture and tatau, and we wanted to share it with the audience. And we know that the audience on the other side of this lens is quite diverse. Some of you might know me from the music space, music production space, some from the avant-garde sound design space, some from film work with Dango Whaasamo 101, and some from just interesting combinations of all those elements. And so whether I'm talking to the students out there who may benefit from this and fellow creatives who inspire me just as much, or whether you're just somebody who's interested in the arts or you're interested in the culture, I'd just like to welcome you so mai malio mai to the stream. We've got up until 8:30 to kind of just kick it and just share how this project came about and a lot of the insights that have gone into this kaupapa. I just wanted to quickly backtrack and just acknowledge everybody that was here for the whakatau over at Massey Uni yesterday. That was an amazing morning and way to kind of kick it all off in analog format before we got into the first studio recordings. I just wanted to acknowledge all the staff, the amazing staff over at Massey University, Ngātai, Herbie, Ngelisi, Belinda, Mike, everybody, the team over there have absolutely been amazing to deal with in kind of creating this project and developing it. We had an amazing hikoi this morning, getting out into the environment, which is a very interesting connection to the tatau, which is all about the land, the sea, and the connection to our physical analog environment. So to kind of have Ngātai guide us through this morning, that was awesome. Really appreciated that. Getting insights into Mātauranga, Mount Victoria, and where the university is, Pukeaho, like that was a really inspiring morning for myself, as well as being over at the marae. So thank you to the Massey University staff and Massey University for this artist in residency opportunity in general to develop this work, Resample Tatau. Handing that development over into the premiering of it with the New Zealand International Arts Festival. Just wanted to acknowledge quickly the staff over there, Marnie, Ange, Sasha, the whole team. Thank you so much for the opportunity to take whatever we develop and platform it with you guys. And so regardless of kind of what happens, we know that what will be, given the current circumstances, but like that unknown, leaning into the pain, that's what this project is all about. So thank you so much to Tawhiri and everybody over there. Just wanted to also acknowledge really quickly the local Wellington inga, who have been absolutely awesome, who have just kind of reached out, and we've had no shortage of just locals and the arts community who have just help make our stay here awesome and just kind of help out wherever they can. So you know who you are with our local Wellington whānau. I just want to acknowledge the local village as well. We are from up in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, down here for this residency, developing the work, and your local hospitality has been nothing short of amazing. So �ㅅ𝒕𝒂𝒖 𝑨𝒓𝒕𝒊𝒔𝒕 𝑀𝒂𝒂𝒖. We're going to get into a presentation that kind of covers how this project developed and kind of how I have kind of come to be working in this space, which is kind of like an intersection of digital production, archiving, and narratives of cultural stories over on a digital platform, and just this interesting intersection. And as I've kind of gone through the process of Tatau and exploring it through this work, there's so many really interesting intersections that I thought would be really valuable to kind of share, and basically hopefully it can help our fellow creatives out there or students that are coming through, and just inform the audience in general about this work, which has been an amazing process for me. To sum it up in a line, I thought I was making the work, but this work has been making me, and you'll understand as we kind of get into the presentation. So we're going to cut over to the keynote. And so, in order to talk about the work, this specific work, for those who aren't familiar with my work, I'm just going to kind of give you a bit of a insight into kind of what I do now and kind of like where that stems from. So I started off as a classical pianist, and I learned classical piano in order to play for a church, a Samoan Methodist. So very proud Samoan Methodist who was raised within the Whaasamoa church and forced to play piano, and that's kind of my background. And that became making beats on cassette tapes initially, looping cassette tapes. So I would plug a keyboard into the stereo and put a cassette tape into tape 1, record drums, and then put that tape into cassette tape B, press it back, and you're hearing the drum, but now you're playing the bass line in, and you just keep swapping cassette tapes until you've got a really hissy cassette tape, but you've got a beat. So that was me in my teens. Eventually that process was replaced by the digital form of music production, which is digital software, so a laptop. So this has been the majority of my life since my teens, and I think that's quite exciting for a lot of our young ones to think that you can just have a career just with a laptop and just capturing data and just repackaging what you're capturing and restructuring within the software, and you can apply it in numerous industries. So I mean, this shot here, that top left one, that picture of me in the plane, that's actually a shot when I was going over to Brisbane as part of a cultural program that I'll explain later. And that beat that I was making at that time is a song called Master by an artist called The Movement, featuring King Kapisi, Mareko, and a lot of other New Zealand hip-hop artists, which eventually ended up on the Hobbs and Shaw soundtrack in Hollywood, like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's movie. So it's fascinating that those kind of situations are possible. On the right, that's me composing for the New Zealand Opera crossover fusion with Onehunga High School. The bottom left is in Queenstown doing some sound design for a theatre show with Auckland Theatre Company, and the right is me capturing and reviewing some sound from the Te Oro soundscapes, all off a laptop. So right off the bat, for our young ones listening, I've always been a real tutu and just kind of follow dot to dot what things do and where they naturally progress, and they take you out of your bedroom studio and then you end up in these really interesting places. But being a creative producer off a laptop has been a real blessing for myself. I've really enjoyed being in different spaces. I get bored quite easily, to be honest, doing the same thing over and over again. So I have had an awesome time just creating, using sound, music and video, and just capturing all that stuff through microphones and cameras, putting it into Logic Pro if you're working with sound and music, or working Final Cut, and then kind of integrating them and so forth. So that's been my journey. And over time, what a philosophy that's really entrenched itself for me, which I find this is the framework I view digital through, is that digital is the new Synit. So for those who aren't familiar with Synit, especially for young ones, like these are the fibers of the coconut husk that the old people would roll on their thighs as they engage in conversation in Talanoa, and they would make these fibers and they would make this rope. But this one raw resource would be able to supply so many industries. I find that fascinating. So you've got a raw material Synit, and back in the islands that would supply the architecture industry. It would, the roll of nails, it would bind all these things together. Then we also have the navigation industry, binding all our boats together. Fishing, they would use it as fishing line, as well as our textiles. And I'm only naming a few here. There's a lot more other people out there in our museums and our galleries who can explain how Synit just can supply so many industries. And as a digital producer, that's essentially what the laptop is. The ability as a raw resource, you can use the software in that laptop to supply the music industry, the radio industry, the film industry, the TV industry, theatre, live production, scoring, music for live production, as well as things for the private sector outside of the public sector. And so this is how I have been generating an income and a career as an artist in this space over the past 20 years. And it's been a real journey, kind of creating for a lot of these different institutions and seeing what they need. Like, how do they tell their stories using audio? How do they tell it using video? How do they tell it using integrated audio and video? How do you do that in a digital sense? How can you replicate it in an analog sense? So this talk is a culmination of those intersections, and hopefully it's of use to our rangatahi and young ones out there. I am somebody who has always struggled with identity, like with who I am. I know we get that a lot. Some cope with it better than others. I didn't cope with it that well. So, like many of us, like many of you out there, like we grew up in South Auckland in the late 80s and the 90s, like hugely shaped. We are products of our environment, and the dominant frequencies, everything we saw, everything we heard, all the fashion we saw, everything was of, a lot of American media and, all of those narratives. And so I grew up like becoming that, you are what you see. Like the world is a vision board, and so what you see, you replicate. So that was me early on in my career, kind of creating with this stuff. And it's been an interesting journey, going from anonymous, having no name, to having my father's name. So I was gifted the name 𝒅𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖 the Matai title, and that's been an interesting journey for myself. And when I refer to the, mat on the left there, like, who I was in church in 𝒅𝒂𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖 that was an identity I would create, like that. I would be that character, which is very different to the character I would be at Auckland Grammar, going to a predominantly Eurocentric school and having to kind of become this character, and then going from there, going over to church, I'd be that conservative character that my parents would want me to be. And then kind of going from that to the 𝒅𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑 car parks with the hip hop crowd bumping Tupac and Dr. Dre out the trunk. That was a different character. So I was like a pinball that just society kind of like just bumps me around, and you just become all these different identities. And that's why I adopted the creative name Anonymous. And I would just kind of become the identity that I needed to be to survive in that world. But, it's been an interesting, awesome journey for me to kind of re-embrace my roots with my family and my ainga, and for Anonymous to have the name 𝒅𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖, that's been a cool journey for myself. So I know that there's fellow artists and people out there that are undergoing the same kind of journey, and I just want to encourage you to keep going, because I know some of you weren't too sure if Matt would make it, but I'm here and we're streaming, so we good. So yeah, it's been cool. That then led to a shift in a lot of the art that I was making. So prior to 2014, a lot of the material that I was making was very American influenced, which is nothing wrong with that. I love the energy of G-Funk and gangster rap, and over in Otara, that is our Compton. Otara here in New Zealand, Otara is Compton and Mangere is Long Beach. So, they've got the tension and the aggression over at Otara, which is where I was schooled up at the Otara Music and Arts Centre. Salute to everybody in the 274. In Mangere means lazy winds and it's down tempo. So a lot of my early stuff was G-funk and, very, very Americanized type of stuff. And then as I embraced that cultural journey with my ʻāinga and the village and all the responsibilities that comes with being a Matai, the art started to change. And this is a shot from a show that we did at the Auckland Arts Festival where we put New Zealand rappers with New Zealand Matai orators because, I was starting to kind of take the best of both worlds, like the stuff that I loved about the hip-hop and the aesthetic and the energy of hip-hop music and production, but also the parallels of that in the 𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖 world, the cultural world, because if you look at it, very, very similar, type preparations. In a hip-hop battle, you've got this rapper trying to outdo that rapper's got their crew behind them, you've got your crew behind them, and you're using words to outwit them, and it's a combination of both memorized verses, and then you kind of freestyle during the battle to kind of, customize your rap to what they're doing, and that's exactly what our fathers do in a Matai launga whakao in a battle. You've got all these alanga upus and proverbs memorized, but you're responding in real time to what the other orator is saying with his crew or his village or his ʻāinga behind him. And so this kind of project here has been quite a shift that has led to this specific project, Resample Tatau. And like I was saying, like that on that picture really is me in a nutshell, that struggle of the homies on the right-hand side and how we grew up saturated by this media that kind of formed our identities then, and then also our anchor, our analog culture. And so I just want to acknowledge everybody that was involved in that particular project. So that was a show called For the Illuminati. This is where I started to embrace video production. So I know a lot of people out there always ask me, they're like, do you do music or do you do video? How did you fall into the video thing? Because it's quite a recent thing of the last 5-6 years, moving over into embracing video production. It's because of this program called Angu Whasamo 101, who I just had to acknowledge, Tanua'i, as well as Mary Tu'u'u, and everybody that's affiliated. I know a lot of you out there know me through this particular work. So in order to research a lot of the cultural elements for that show that I just talked about, For the Illuminati, which was exploring the intersection between hip-hop oratory, rap culture, and 𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖 culture, oratory, launga. I went to this program, cut a long story short, I went along in 2014 just to do some research into how I could learn more about the cultural side, and I ended up being with this movement for about 4 or 5 years. And so they basically just put a camera in my hand because as I was doing my research and going along to the classes and learning about the different elements of 𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖, I would film it and then make notes. And then towards the end of that 12-week program, Tanua'i asked me, hey, can you just edit something together so we can show our parents what we did during the past 12 weeks? And I was like, I'm not an editor, I'm not a video guy, but I guess I'll give iMovie a try for everyone out there on iMovie and GarageBand. It's not the gear, it's the ear, it's just how you use it. So I was like, oh yeah, whatever, I'll give it a go. And edited it together. We put it out and it went viral. And then Melbourne, the diaspora over in Melbourne, there were a bunch of awesome students out there who reached out to Tanua'i saying, can you bring your program here? And then Tanua'i was like, can you come and do the same thing you just did with your camera work here? And so accompanied them on that trip. And then that trip to Melbourne became an invitation to Sydney, became Perth, became Wellington. And before you know it, we were doing the circuit to the Samoan diaspora in all these major cities where our populations are. And I was just basically in each city living out of a suitcase. You can see the ratio of clothing to equipment. And that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that period. In each city it would just be like pull up and work with the locals. Like, who are the musicians here? Let's record some music. And who do I need to interview? Let's film that. And I started to kind of get used to the equipment. like I said, I've always been a tutu, just figuring out how things capture sound or video and then figuring out how you can flip that. I guess that's the hip-hop philosophy, and all the hip-hoppers know that's why we love hip-hop, is the ability to take what's existing and flip it into something else and sample things and so forth, which is obviously a foundational concept for Resample Tatau. And so that's how I fell into it. So 4 to 5 years of just roaming with the program and just making music on the fly, run and gun videography and editing on the fly. And we created a lot of really cool pieces of content. And, you know, this is where I started to integrate it. Like I would film things, put it into Final Cut, output the audio and into Logic, sample that, make a beat, and then take that soundtrack, put it back into Final Cut, and then cut the visuals to that new beat. So I know that might sound a little bit weird, but for those who haven't seen, I'm just going to play a quick little video here. And so this was an example of what I was doing during that circuit, and it was a really cool time. So, you know, I'd film people doing the tatau, which I'll get into shortly, you know, between 11 and 2, and then, you know, just take that and then quickly cut up the audio and then make a beat out of it and then finish editing the video all within a few hours, and then we upload it. And I say that because, you know, I'm relatively older and newer to the game, but I know the young ones out there could do it much faster. And I absolutely think that this is where the future of our digital production is heading, is this integration of all the different forms and weaving them all together at scale and at pace. And so I'll play this little piece here if you haven't already seen it, but this was content that kind of started birthing the concept of this work. So this is a little piece for the Ngauwhā Samoa covering the Perth Malufi exhibition.
I've been waiting for this for 25 years, and you know, the pain it's there, but to me I try to obsolete it, that it's not there, even though it is there. And it's all about getting the technique right, but also at the same time it's about control. The pain is always there. So you just have to figure out a way or something to motivate yourself to survive every day and go forward. So my motivation was my wife and my kids, and especially my son that's not here.
Experience was nothing that I have ever experienced before. Thinking about my family helped me pull through.
Listen up closely. Y'all are the reason ain't been getting no sleep.
So, yeah, cut to the presentation. So that was an awesome experience traveling with the Ngauwhā Samoa 101. Again, I just want to acknowledge the tutors for the program, as well as the amazing students that I got to meet around the world on this program, and kind of watch your journey, because your journey is my journey, trying to learn the language again and the culture and just reconnect to our family anchors, our cultural anchors. So that was a real privilege that really inspired and shaped me as an artist, that whole period, documenting your guys' stories and just flipping them in laptops. It was also a real privilege because the program had an informal partnership with the Aingā the Sulu Ape clan, in terms of the malo fear aspect of the culture. And so, you know, it gave me close proximity to the Grandmaster, 𝖓𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖 𝑨𝒓𝒕𝒊𝒔𝒕 and his sons 𝒔𝒑𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖, and we got to do numerous exhibitions with them both here as well as in Australia, and just kind of being around them and kind of hanging out with them and just kind of getting that real upfront analog insight into kind of how they operate and why they operate and just the nature of their work It was a really inspiring time that obviously had a massive influence on this project. So I just wanted to acknowledge Le Ainga Sasua, as well as Gulawenga, Li Whaiva, the whole Tufunga fraternity. Much respects for all that you guys do for our amazing cultures here in the Moana. So, I got to archive a lot of their work, having a camera and being able to access, lots of cool angles and things that would benefit these projects later on. I consider myself an archive artist to a certain degree. Like, I just like archiving and just recording things, not for anything specifically, but I just bank it. And that's what I've been doing with this program, is every time going back to Samoa or in different cities for the program, I'll just film extra stuff and just bank it in the hard drives. And at some point it will be ripe for the picking. A project will come up, which is how this project come up, and it's like, oh yeah, I've got the building blocks to get that going. And so that was awesome to have that proximity with the Tufunga clan from the Ainga Sasua. So now, I'll start leaning into what the Resample series is. So when I'm taking all these archives, what I've always enjoyed geeking out on is flipping them. Like, it's a hip hop thing where you kind of take whatever and like, how many ways can I flip this? Just like we were talking with the Synod, how many industries can you supply with one raw resource? And so the Resample series was outside of the traditional music production, like the hip hop influence stuff, the 3-minute, thing for radio. Like, that was cool, but I liked geeking out on the more weirder stuff. And so, for about a decade now, I regularly create these compositions, which I loosely refer to as Resample, the Resample series. And these are compositions, audio visual compositions, where I take found sounds, like I would record locations, and then I would take them and arrange them and sample them, structure it out to the narrative of a local legend or story from that location I'm recording. So that's the best, most cohesive way I can kind of put it, is, resampling to me is just sampling and restructuring found sound and location audio recordings into audio visual compositions that are structured to the narratives of local stories that are relevant to that location. So I like to look at it as the intersection of time, space, and intention, but we'll get into that later. And so I've had numerous iterations of resample pieces, and I haven't put them all here, but these are kind of like the main ones so far. So in 2014 is kind of where it started. Like, that's the point where I was doing a lot of like really American influenced gangster rap, and not in a try-hard way where I am a gangster by any sorts, but we are around them in South Auckland and Mangere and Otara, and so I love the energy of it. So I would provide a lot of the music to a lot of our gangster rap community, which I'm still proud of, because it's about authenticity, and I was just soundtracking what they were really doing. I know the media loves to beat up on South Auckland, but it was the truth of what we were up to. So Resample South Auckland, I started shifting that narrative away from myself, and I just ran around the hood with a Zoom H1 recorder and just recording things and then putting them in to the software and then chopping it up. So that's Resample South Auckland. Tautai Pacific Arts Trust, you know who you are. They gave me an opportunity to do an arts demonstration talk with John Dunn, who's an awesome surgeon, and he had this amazing mansion over in Herne Bay on the edge of a cliff with a helicopter. It was buzzy. I'm just from the hood, so we're in this crazy place, and they just got me to kind of run around and sample everything, his helicopters, the dog barking, and then I built a private soundscape for him, and then demonstrated it for him and his arts patron friends. So that was cool. That was in 2014 as well. And in 2016, if you're in Tamaki Makaurau, there's an amazing building, the Te Oro building, the Glenonus Music and Arts Centre. So I was very fortunate to be commissioned to create the permanent public art soundscapes that are built into the exterior of the roof. So if you see that building, it's an amazing building, and they've got these speaker sound sites, 6 of them built into the roof outside, and they play soundscapes 24 hours a day. And so I based myself there for a year, just geeking out and just running around the hood with microphone setups and just sampling the trees, the local waters, everything I could, the community groups. I think we had 300 community groups kind of all be sampled, and then we threw them in the software and chopped them all up, sampled it. Also got to work with the local iwi, Ngāi Taiki Tāmaki, Ngāti Paua, and Ngāti Whātua, their composers, to create theirs as well. So that was a massive one. That kind of really kind of pushed me into a lot of this work with Resample Tatau. And then 2008, I'm not too sure if it's 2018 or should have been 16, but Resample Guahan. A lot of you out there would have been chilling alongside myself over in Guahan, part of the New Zealand Aotearoa delegation to FESPAC. That was awesome. Much respects Creative New Zealand for having me on there. I really enjoyed that. That really inspired me. So for the 2 weeks of the festival, running around with same thing, just handheld audio recorder, record everything happening on the island, chuck it in, and then sampling it. And so the element that I was talking about, restructuring it to a narrative. So the Glen Innes, there's a local legend about Titahi and Parehuia and the elopement and the arrival of the waka and the connection down to Pātea. So I literally, like, once I was just reading through the Te Oro soundscape history stuff, I was like, oh man, I'm going to hop in the car, go to Pātea and record the waves there because the legend says this. Same thing with Resample Guahan. Without getting into too much detail, over in Guam is where there's a place called Retidian Bay, which is where 𝖓𝒓𝒕𝒂𝒖, who was part of the original Mau movement from Samoa in 1909, when they were exiled by the Germans to Saipan, he escaped from Saipan and he rode solo across really dangerous water and came ashore safely at Retidian Bay in Guam. Once I knew that story, I was like, I'm going to take all these samples from around FESPAC and then chop them up and structure them out and to tell his story. And so that's kind of like the Resample series. So this project that this artist talk is about Resample Tatau, where of all the different narratives and stories, I've had to kind of be a method producer, method actor to kind of structure it out. This has been an interesting one because this is about myself. Tatau is about identity. It's about bleeding for your family, bleeding for your art. And so this has been an interesting challenge for myself because, I'm not trying to tell Parehuia's story as I did with Glen Innes, or try to tell 𝖓𝒓𝒕𝒂𝒖 and the Mau movement story through Resample Guahan, Resample Tatau. I have to tell my story, and that's a tricky story to tell when you don't even really know who you are as anonymous and you're trying to find your way back. And so that's what this project is about, and we're about to kind of dive deeper into that. So Resample Tatau, huge thank you to everybody that's been a part, as I've acknowledged at the beginning, of bringing this project to life. Just wanted to acknowledge the development of this work is through Massey University. So I just want to acknowledge Herbie again and Ngātai and the whole team over there who basically said, here's some time and space and also this wonderful facility here for you to repair your sails. This building I'm in is actually, as Herbie reminded me, they used to repair the sails of boats before they sail out, and I've done a lot of repairing here. And so shout out to Massey University for the opportunity to develop this work. And then also, premiering it as the Aotearoa New Zealand Festival of the Arts, Tāwhiri, the whole team over there, Ange, Mani, Sasha, it's been awesome dealing with you guys as well. So to just have all these different strands woven together, it's been a real honour. So Resample Tatau. So this is how Resample Tatau seeded. This is the first throw at the dartboard to kickstart this project. Like I say, I've always kind of started with archives that just get archived, and then at some point something flames up or flicks, and that's the start of it. And so how Resample Tatau started for me was, at the time, this is in 2014, I was doing the sound design for Pacific Media Network. So that's Radio 531 as well as New FM, so our flagship Pacific radio stations. And so they were like, Matt, we need you to do the jingles. So in between every song, every 4 minutes, there's like a little ad that says the name of the station, 531 or New FM. And I looked at it and I was like, man, this is a form of social programming. You're broadcasting frequencies into the homes every 4 minutes. Like, that's a way, you know, frequencies, that's another deep dive. They're very powerful things. You know, frequency, vibration, the law of resonance, all that type of thing. So I was like, what are the frequencies I need to kind of broadcast into people's homes for this specific sound design? So I didn't just want to sit in my studio and just kind of play patches out of Logic or out of my Yamaha keyboard or whatever. Like, I was like, I need to get the right frequencies into our homes, into our communities at a frequency vibrational level. So one of the things I wanted to do was tatau. I was like, yeah, let me just get the sampling of some tapping and use them as hi-hats for one of the jingles. And so I was like, cool, I'm going to go along and just try to find somebody who's getting tatau and record it. So at that time, I had no interest in tatau, to be honest. My father has one, and I've always, you know, seen it, but I've never really, at that point, never had any inclination to get one or even any interest in it. To me, the tatau, I knew it was a Samoan thing, but it was no different to the ice cream on his arm. It was like just a tattoo. So one thing led to another. I went along to a Macaulay and De La Salle 𝑹𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒐 Day that they had at MIT in Otara. And then, because Tanua'i from the 101 program, he goes, hey, if you want to record some tapping, they're having a live tatau exhibition over at MIT. You should go along to that. So I went along to that. And I didn't know that the guy who was getting tataued is actually one of the homies from the hood. So Sam, shout out Sam Walker. And then he was like, hey, what are you up to, man? And I was like, oh, I want to record the sound of the tapping to use for some, you know, radio sound design jingles. And then he was like, oh, cool, it's a bit noisy here for the students. Maybe you want to come over to, you know, I've got another session on Saturday in the weekend, and you can just record then. And I was like, oh, that would be cool. He goes, yeah, you can record in peace and, you know, just get what you need. And I was like, oh, thank you for that. So, yeah, I showed up in the weekend. Māngere Garage showed up, and he was having a session. I wasn't really, I didn't have a lot of cultural awareness or anything at the time. I hadn't embarked on, you know, it was very early into the cultural program, 𝒓𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑 101. So looking back, I broke a lot of cultural protocols. Like, I just kind of walked in and just set up my gear, and, you know, there was no whakulima or whaaloalo, or I had a lava, which was, I thought, you know, that was ticking the box. And I just set up my gear. And the tufunga at the time, Tui Whaasina, shout out Tui Whaasina, you know, he looked up and he was like, who's this dude with his microphones? And I was like, thinking Sam had, you know, briefed him, and then Sam was like, sorry, I forgot to tell him. And I was like, oh. But I wasn't really paying attention. I just wanted to get the recordings and be done with it and go out. Ironically, they were listening to 531. And so I recorded the tapping, you know, I turned down the stereo, and like, don't ever turn off a tufunga stereo. And, you know, looking back, I apologize. But, you know, that was young, you know, that was inexperienced, non-culturally literate Matt. And before I left that session, the tufunga was like, you're not going anywhere. Like, can you just sit down? Mai kako me ai, you know, everyone bring out the food, you know, I want to talk to you. And I was like, okay, yeah, cool. And so they wrapped up their session, it all finished. And then the tufunga was like, you know, like, who are you? And I was like, oh, I'm Matt. And then he was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm just here to record Sam's, your tapping, and I'm going to make some radio jingles. Ironically, see that radio station that's playing? Like, that's going to be your tapping, you know, in these jingles. Thinking it was cool. And he was like, okay, can you please lift up your lava? Can I see your knees? And, you know, I lifted it up, and he goes, oh, you don't have the tatau? And I was like, no, I don't. And then he goes, and it's essentially what he said next that changed it for me. He was like, that's cool. He goes, to you it's just a sound, to us it's a feeling. And, you know, as musicians, like, we play for the feeling. Like, we structure our chords and our voicings and our rhythms and our swing before and after the beat and our textures for the feeling. And so, you know, he was like, you know, to you it's just a tapping sound. It's a sound, but to us it's a feeling. If you really want to kind of, you know, your art to flourish for yourself, because obviously you're interested. It's not every day anyone's coming to record the stuff for the purposes that you're doing. You know, you might want to consider getting it. That was the moment I was going to get it. Like, I instinctively knew I'm not doing anything else any other work. I'm not going to make any more beats in the hip hop space. I'm not doing nothing until I get my tatau. So that's the disclaimer, everyone. Like, I know the majority of people get their tatau for cultural reasons, you know, for their family, to make their family proud, because their grandma, you know, wanted them to have it, or their grandfather had it and wanted them, all these amazing reasons. That was not the start of my journey. It became an outcome of the journey, but that's not how I started. So I just wanted to bleed for the art. I wanted to know how it felt. Like, I could hear how it sounded, but I wanted to know how it felt. So that's how Resample started. I left that garage and I went straight back to Otahu, where I was staying at the time, with my amazing wife. So I just want to acknowledge Te Malu Norma. I would not be the artist I am, or even the person I am, without your support. So I just wanted to kind of intercept that there. But I just went home to her and I just walked into the lounge. She was watching TV and I was like, I'm getting my tatau. I'm getting a tatau done. And basically one thing led to another. The following year, I got, as part of the Angu Whaasamo 101 partnership with the 𝖓𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒍𝒆 clan, who were having an exhibition. You know, they basically just said, here's your opportunity if you want your tatau done. And I was like, cool. I am going to get my tatau done, and not only that, like I said with the archives, I'm going to get my tatau done, but I'm going to document it all, I'm going to record it all the sampling of the tapping, and then I know at some point later on, i.e. now, those tapping sounds and those archives will come in useful for a project. So that's how Resample Tatau was seeded. Now, I am aware that some of our audience may not fully know what tatau is, so just a really quick rundown on what tatau is. I'm not going to get into like the history of it and all these things. It gets really contentious and political and all those types of things. There's no shortage of material and people out there that can inform you of that. So I'm just going to tell you about what the practice is, and then kind of how I have woven it into this particular project. So it's basically just a tattoo that's applied using hand-tapped tools, le'au, which have, you know, fine needles or fine teeth on it that are dipped in ink, and then you apply it on the skin, and then, you know, you tap it, you hand tap it into the skin. That's essentially what it is. So different cultures have different versions of it. So as a Samoan, you know, our malo fia version, and we have one as males that starts from our ribs down to our knees, and the females have one that's on that thigh area down to the knees. And so that's a cool little image that kind of gives you a glimpse into kind of what it looks like in that diagram. There's lots of material out there. You can do the deep dive if this is the first time you've heard about tatau, but it's a, you know, it's a painful process. So, you know, and the thing that really started to kind of get me interested in this project was, especially being around le koinga, le whianga ya 𝒓𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖 it was this notion he would often talk about, like he was so proud that our ancestors, our Pacific ancestors, had devised it as a way of archiving history. It was an analog archive of history. And he would often say, you know, this civilization, they wrote their history to be transmitted down on scrolls, but the scrolls ended up being burnt, or they etched it into this medium here, and then hundreds of years it would wither away and it would change. And so our ancestors came up with this way where they realized that as a canvas, as a medium, that the skin would be a safe way to preserve and archive our history, so that the patterns and the symbols and the stories that are told and embedded in it can be passed down visually from father to son, from master to apprentice. And I was like, that's really fascinating. That's an analog form of archiving. Because we live in an era where it's a digital form of archiving. We preserve our stories by putting them into binary ones and zeros and on a hard drive, and we preserve our history that way. So, you know, that started getting me thinking about the concepts for Resample Tatau. Like I said, I was really privileged to be around the community and kind of just, you know, seeing the perspective of people getting the tatau, our generation, you know, in Brisbane, Wellington, you know, Auckland, where all the exhibitions were with the program, as well as seeing the tatau clan, the 𝖓𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒐𝒂𝒑, how they go about their work and the dynamics of their craft. And so all these things were intersecting, like, the experience from the practitioners to those who were receiving it, from analog archiving, and I'm a digital artist that works with archives. And so all these worlds were just kind of bubbling away, and I knew something was forming and that a project would click at some point. And so I got mine done in 2015, like I said. Undertook it, I did it 7 sessions. I got it done over 7 sessions. I'm not a physical person, like I don't play sports, I've never kind of been a contact person, so to undergo this kind of physical pain for me from the very first tap was just insane. Like during the first tap, I didn't know if I would survive the ordeal, to be honest, but this isn't a talk about that whole journey. It was just a very difficult journey, a painful journey physically, for myself as well as mentally, but I managed to document it all and record all the samples. And I was very lucky to have my 𝖓𝒔𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖. And as we know in the fraternity of Tatau and our cultures, 𝖓𝒓𝒕𝒂𝒖 like who's undergoing it is not as important as those who are supporting. And so I had a lot of support from my family and friends, and I just want to acknowledge everybody that supported me as well. I'd just like to also acknowledge everybody else on the exhibition, blood brothers and sisters who also got their malu and tatau done. You know who you are, but it was an amazing journey to journey alongside you on this. So not only was I recording the digital, archiving it digitally, there was this concept that I picked up in my work in the classical space. So being classically taught, I've worked with a lot of orchestras and stuff along the way as well. And there's this thing that I started to hear from a lot of those that make the violins or the instruments, is they had this concept of when you make a new instrument that you would break it in using frequencies. So if you had a new violin, you would place it in front of speakers and you would play classic music through it so that the wood would be ingrained with the vibrations of classic music, so that it in turn could play classic music. I know that a lot of guitarists do this as well, like they'll buy a new guitar and they don't play it straight away. They just put it in front of speakers and they'll be, play the classic music that they idolize, that they love those tones, and they want this guitar, the wood, because it hasn't been played before, to kind of be resonated and filled and programmed with those tones and frequencies. So taking that concept into account, I was like, man, I want to do that also when I was getting my tatau done. So not only do I have the microphones capturing my journey in a digital form, but I also had a log drum that was capturing it in an analog form that was nearby me. So the whole time I was getting tapped, I had a log drum there from Samoa. Norma and I, we were in Samoa the week beforehand. Just kind of, we were there for something else. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a perfect opportunity to get a log drum that hadn't been played before and a conch shell as well. And so the following week when I got my tatau done, they were right there next to the microphones, capturing just the sound of the tapping, because the log drum itself is an instrument that gets tapped. I also want to talk about an interesting story that happened to me. So the very first session, when you get your tatau done, they start on your back, what they refer to as the va'a. And like you start on your stomach, and I lay down and went through the first taps. As I said, it was excruciating pain. The first tap I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to survive this line. But by the time you finish thinking that thought, they're on the second line. And so like, okay, well, I survived that. And then the second line, and you're thinking, okay, what have I got myself into here? I feel like I'm going to tap out, I'm going to embarrass my family and all of this. And your mind just starts wandering off. But while you're thinking that, you're on the third line. And so it was this really interesting process in the first couple of minutes. In about the first 3 minutes, about 3 minutes into my personal tatau journey, and everybody's different. You talk to anybody that's received the tatau and their malu, everybody has a different experience. And I was kind of, talking to people beforehand, they were like, your mind's going to go to some weird places and you may hallucinate and have visions and all these types of things. About 3 minutes into my tatau journey, everything went black. So, I'm facing down on the fala and my mind's just racing and everything. And then everything just goes to black. And I was trying to figure out what was happening. And what actually then happened is the the light came back, and I was like, okay, I'm not passed out or something, but I felt like I was looking out a slit. Like, I felt like if you imagine a ninja, their whole face is covered, but they're looking out their eyes. And that's literally how I could see, and I was like, okay, this is really weird. Within a few seconds of that realization, I was like, the pain momentarily disappeared from myself, and I was like, this is how it feels like to be a log drum. This is what it feels like to be a lali. If you can imagine the POV, the perspective of being inside a log drum, the slit in the log drum looking out, because essentially you're lying there like a log and you're being tapped by the tufunga. And so that was a very powerful moment. So I made a mental note on the fala, on the mat, while being under I was like, whatever you sample and create with this piece, make sure that you have an analog representation, like that log drum that's sitting there capturing these vibrations. That's going to be a really important part of the piece. So make sure that lali and tapping things becomes an important strand in the final form of the work. So that was really cool. So to kind of take all of that and kind of bring it all into, okay, so what's Resample Tatau? What's this going to look like in the TSB or however this performance eventuates? I took all those samples, and then sampling, this is the original idea that I had, and I will talk about how it then morphed over Christmas. But the original idea I had was to take those samples and then build 7 soundscapes. So I got my tatau done over 7 sessions, and so I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna take those tappings from the first session, and that's gonna be a movement, build something out of that. Take the sounds from my second session, that's another movement. So in the same way symphonies go through different movements, it's gonna be a 7 movement soundscape of beats, sample them, make beats, and then I would overlay it with orchestration and other musical elements, and that would play live over it, and that we would have the log drum, as you can see there, which would be played live at the show. So not only, when you're sitting in the audience, not only are you hearing the digital archives, which have been flipped, but you're also hearing the analog archive, the actual log drum, which is over here behind me, that would be performed on stage as well. So you've got the intersection of archives. This work is the intersection of digital and analog archiving. That's one kind of way to think about it. So that was what I wanted to build, and it would be an hour long. So that's what I went into when I was approached by Herbie to go, for the residency, what would you like to build? And then at the same time, the New Zealand Festival, like, what would you like to show? I was like, this is the work. This is how it's all shaping up. And what happened is I sat down in the initial part of this residency in December. So it kept getting delayed because of the lockdowns in Auckland. So initially this residency was supposed to actually be a couple of years back, as part of the government house residency with Massey University. But obviously COVID hit, and then we had a change in Governor General. But Herbie kept batting for me, and I really appreciate you also for seeing the value in myself and the work that I was doing. And so one thing led to another, and it became this residency. And so when I came down, eventually after lockdown lifted in Auckland and safe to travel and vaccinated, all of that stuff, when I sat down with the archives, 20 minutes into the very first composition section, like I was starting to sample it and make beats, I knew that it wasn't going to work. I was like, what's happening normally? This is what I do. Like, the beats should just flow, or why is this not clicking, and so forth. And the next day here in residency, it wasn't clicking. Even though I was amongst such inspirational environment and everything, the music wasn't coming. And so I was getting worried because, huge stakeholders, I'm just going to be very transparent, Massey University putting their faith in me, the festival, and the art wasn't coming. And so I had to dig deep heading into Christmas, thinking, okay, why is it not clicking? Matt, go back into the fundamentals. Like, what did you learn when you're sitting in there watching 𝖆𝖓𝒓𝒕𝒂𝒖 kind of break down a work and rebuild it again with Black Race, or this person in theatre, or this person? And I've been really lucky to kind of sit in some room with some OGs, and all you OGs know who you are. And I would not be who I am now without kind of being exposed to a lot of your shaping of me and mentoring me. So I went back to what you guys always remind me to do, which is like go back to the core fundamentals of what is this project about? What is the core theme? What is the essence of this? And I realized I was getting caught up in the technical aesthetics of Tatau. You know, it was about, the tapping, literally sampling the tapping, and in a way it was almost like my ego was like trying to impress the hip-hop community. Look, I can flip these samples. Look, I can orchestrate to the classical community. And the Tatau was just the aesthetic, marketing for it. And it wasn't deep enough, so I was like, okay, what is the core thing? Go back, Matt, to that when you got your Tatau. What do you remember? What is the core thing with the pain? And then that's where this project kind of realigned and everything clicked. The tufunga tells you, when you sit down on the mat, he looks you in the eye and he's like, yeah, lafwai, yeah, mea lo kingo, like, give your body over to me. Gali le au, like, lean into the pain, accept the pain. Like, don't fight the pain. Like, it's this really weird thing where you centralize the pain. Like, when it's hurting, you don't strain. He's like, if you strain, that ink is not going to stay in. It's going to get pushed out. You're going to make things complicated. You're going to be at risk of more infection, and you may not survive this journey, or you won't complete it, and your family's going to be, all of that stuff. So they drum it into you, relax. Accept the pain, lean into the pain. The more it hurts, lean into it more. And so I was like, that's the fundamental concept I need to build this project around, is about leaning into the pain. And not physically. This is what I've learned. This is the big realization for me. This is my aha moment for this project. You talk to anybody that has the Tatau and you have these conversations like, what was the most sorest part for you? Some people say, the back of the leg killed me, or my sides, that was hard. Or like, there is no universal scale for pain with Tatau. And so that was the wrong question. Like, I was like, that's not the pain I should be building this work off. I shouldn't be building off the aesthetics of the technical side of Tatau or technical side of production. I shouldn't build it around all these elements. It's almost the philosophical nature of Tatau, the leaning into the pain. And that's where I realized for myself, I was like, okay, what are the most painful things for me that I haven't leaned into? And we all have this. Everybody, including you on the other end of this lens, there's something that you think about daily, but you run away. Like, when you think about it, you're like, I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to, as humans, our default setting is to run away from pain, whether that's physical, touch the oven, and I'm not going to do that. Or, some uncomfortable drama with somebody and you're not going to have that conversation. We as humans are programmed to run away from pain. Tatau tells us to lean into the pain, and that's where I had the realization that this project is now built around. That's why the tagline for it is Tali le au, lean into the pain. And so I made a list of like, okay, Matt, what are the most painful things for you? Like what are your sore points that you need to take and metaphorically put them on the mat and lean into it? And I had to have a lot of self-reflection over the Christmas period. So, I went back up to Auckland. My ainga, we went to Pai here, and, being around my nieces and nephew, my ainga, and, even then I wasn't giving them my full attention because my mind was on this. And that in itself is one of my main pain points is, for a long time, I have just been too focused on the art and stuff, and not prioritizing a lot of things that I should have. And there's a guilt there. I have a lot of guilt around the church. Like, I am a product of being at church 7 days a week, like the best training ground ever. We are arranging on the fly, we're creating things on the go. Māngere Methodist, like, you go through the youth list of who's in the industry now and you see who's there. Like, it's the best training ground for the arts industry. But at the same time, there was a real sacrifice for myself. So I would be, at church Monday for local, Tuesday for Okalavo, Wednesday to play for local, Thursday be aonga whaiaonga with teachers, Friday youth groups, Saturday choir practice, and then Sunday would be church services. So that was me up to my mid-20s. So now that I'm in the industry, I kind of think about a lot of the missed time out of the industry, and I've got a lot of resentment around that. So I'm just being frank, and sometimes that I'm like, am I blaming God, or is this a church thing? So I just made a list of all the painful things as an adult, as 40-year-old Matt, 41-year-old Matt now, and I'm like, that energy, those things that you don't you don't want to acknowledge about yourself. You know, there's a selfishness, there's an, almost ego problem. All these types of things that we don't want to reflect on about ourselves. I'm like, like Tatau teaches us, like when you lean into the pain, at some point, you complete it and then you heal. And then from the healing you grow, and what do you know? You have a new identity, like literally and metaphorically. So I was like, if you want to be a better person, man, you're going to have to make some changes in your life. And so I have been in therapy for the past 3 years of a lot of things. And this isn't a conversation for that, so I'm not going to get into it. But through this project, I realized it's not about the tapping, it's not about the aesthetics of Tatau, it's about the philosophical framework of leaning into the pain, because that is where our growth is. And that philosophical framework is something I was like really excited about, because I was like, so if our ancestors devised the system to kind of reprogram us, because like I said, our inherent fight or flight DNA is to kind of avoid pain, avoid the scary tiger and run away from it and all these types of things. That this was a system that was devised as a rite of passage, so that when you undergo it, it trains you to lean into the pain physically, because that will give you a framework philosophically and mentally to be able to cope with life, because life is hard. So if you were a caveman that got Tatau'd, and these are my random thoughts, I was like, so if you're a caveman in like say the 1200s or whenever, if you had the Tatau, maybe you woke up one day, mental health problems or whatever, and you don't want to go hunting that day. But you have to, because you've got to feed your family. You've got to lean into the pain. Do it. Push through the pain. If you were in the Māori movement in the 1900s, and the Germans and the New Zealanders were offering, these economic benefits if you sell out your culture and all these elements, some people take it. But if you were to told, you would go, this is a difficult conversation. I'm not going to run from this conversation. I'm going to lean into it. And we aren't going to sell out. We are going to maintain our independence and lean into the pain. So Tatau, lean into the pain, that's the framework for this work. It's this philosophy about leaning into, it's an ancient ritual designed to build resilience and determination in people through the embracing and acceptance of pain, as opposed to our default human nature to avoid it. So the other elements of Tatau that's informing this work, there's an amazing book if you haven't seen it, and shout outs to Sean Mellon. Like this book here, it's amazing. Like, it was so inspiring going through this, and it covers so many different angles, and so it really got me thinking, going deeper into that philosophical framework. The aesthetic stuff, the cultural stuff, it's all there. Like, we have seen the docos, we've watched the movies, we've seen the interviews, we've read the poetry, we've seen the paintings, we've seen the photography around Tatau. So really this work has been kind of trying to find the remix to it, the hip-hop, like what hasn't been covered yet, because I want to contribute to our space, because we've had such amazing contributions to the intersections of Tatau and our art world. And so some of the conversations that are covered in this work is this navigation of va, which is the relationships. If you go to a Tatau session, like just looking at this session here, this is from Perth. What's fascinating, for those who don't know what va is, when we refer to it in the Moana, in the Pacific, it's the sacred space between us. Not just in a literal physical sense, but in a spiritual sense, like who we are and who we inherit and our ancestors around us, and when we move into spaces with other people and theirs, and how do those spaces engage. Tatau is a fascinating intersection of va, because there's so many crazy relationships going on in this one setting. So if you look at the setting here, there's a relationship between the tufunga, the person doing the Tatau, and the person he's Tatauing. So they have a va. They have a specific, dynamic between them. Then you have the tufunga and his stretchers who are assisting him, and then there's a way that they manage their system between their interactions and their va. And then you also have a dynamic going on between the person that's lying down and their supporting family, their ainga, their friends, le kapua inga. And that's one of the main things about Tatau is, you're not going to get through it without the support of your family. So, there's a dynamic there going on. Then there's a dynamic between the audience and the tufunga. There's a way that you engage with them and you talk to them. There's certain things you call them by, and there's certain ways you engage with them. And so, I'm only listing a few. So at any given point in the Tatau process, you've got this really complex intersection of relationships, of va, because it's not the same for everybody. Even the way where you sit, what you're wearing, what you do, even the person who's undergoing the Tatau, what you do and cannot do, shaving, being alone at any given point, no sex, no being out in the sun. There's all these crazy things, and a lot of these go back to, the rituals of ancient times around the burning of the candle nut. You can go down the rabbit hole if you want, but what's happening at this point is we're spilling blood. Like, that's essentially, like, while there's the ritual spilling of blood, there's all these complex relationships that are all intersecting at that time and space. And so, like, that's one of the concepts I wanted to explore in this work. I find the va during the Tatau process very interesting. Like, the amount of complex relationships that are being navigated at that time and space is fascinating to me. You end with the Tatau with getting your belly button done, and they say that that signifies a rebirth, because that is your connection to your mother. So there's a general understanding that by getting your buke done, is it's your rebirth. You have to man up, and you have to mature and get on with life, and make sure you're responsible for your aing and your community, and you serve. And so, in the same way that it's a rebirth of sorts, because I'm making a work, of all the different spaces I've been on, I'm making a work on Tatau, for me it signifies an artistic rebirth, which has been paralleled with a personal rebirth, because I really have had to, over this project, and especially over the last 3 years, I owe so much gratitude to a lot of people who have sacrificed a lot because of me, and the chaos that I have brought to our va. And so, I've had to really reset and just rebirth myself through this project because of the nature of what the work is about. Other things that are explored in this work is the act of submission. We grow up in a world now where the power plays and the struggles going on in every industry. It's about outdoing each other. It's about, and the nature of Tatau is you're not trying to fight. You're not trying to get one up. You're not trying to make more money for your stockholders. And all these types of things are about submission. It's about giving into, do with me, just what you need, to tell me. I'm going to lean into the pain, obviously, which I've covered. Also, repetition. Obviously, we are the product of our habits. And Tatau is just the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it teaches you to be resilient. You just lie there and you have no idea when it's going to be done, and you're just there in this constant pain that's just there, and before you know it, as I've said in another piece, because you've got stretchers who are stretching the skin, holding you down, there's not a lot of light that comes in, but when it's done, it's almost like a metaphor. They all step back and the light comes in, you see the light. And then the tufunga sprays you down, because your skin's burning, and you feel the cold spray, and then you'll survive that session, and then it's on to the next. So that nature is actually part of the show. So without giving too much away, if you're in the audience for Resample Tatau, you're going to feel like you're under the ao. So that notion of being pushing through a particular session, and then you find relief at the conclusion of that session. In this piece, I'm trying to recreate that through the audience experience when you're watching the visuals and the music, that you're going through a session as well. And then lastly, the assignment of meaning. Tatau's a political topic. It's a complex topic, and especially learned so much talking just in the short time I've had to pick Sean Mellon's mind and the amazing work he does. And so with this project, it's not a commentary on Tatau itself, or its history, or its origins, or what's the right way of doing things, or which version of the legend. I'm not interested in that stuff. What I am interested in is assigning the meaning of my journey through Tatau. And so, yeah. And the final concept that I find really interesting about this work is this notion of independence and interdependence. What I mean by that is it's this fascinating journey where in one way, you can only get through it yourself. Like when you lie down on the mat, no one can come lie on the mat and take the pain for you. Like it's all on you. Like when you get the tatau, you are responsible, personal responsibility, independence. But at the same time, you cannot get through this journey without the help of others. You know, you have to have people that fulfill you, who massage you and look after you. There's some sacred things around being left alone. You cannot be left alone. So somebody's always got to sacrifice their time to be near you, sleep near you, and just make sure that you're safe. And obviously you are immobilized. You are a walking open wound. And there are so many things that you will not be able to do. And so you are reliant on others. So tatau is a fascinating philosophical thing where it trains you to kind of embrace both ends of the spectrum. That it's both independent, the rights of the individual, right-wing, conservatism, but then it's also about interdependence, where it's about the global village and everybody working together, or left-wing, socialism. So there's a lot of really interesting, I guess, parallels that tatau kind of teaches us about the space. And obviously, we can see that happening in the world right now with nationalism and globalization and this whole COVID thing that's kind of happening about supply chains and the ability to kind of serve yourself and protect yourself and your borders and all these types of things. These complex conversations that the world's having can, you know, I think there's a lot of answers that we can find in tatau. And then for the audience, the call to action is, in the same way I as an individual have learned a lot from this project. Like I said, I thought I was making the project, but this project's making me. And that's not a tagline, it really is. I've had more fun outside of this project because of the growth I'm finally having with my ʻāinga, with my wife, my friends, and everybody who's invested in myself, and just trying to get that balance right in life. But that's something that we can embrace as a world community, to engage in direct painful conversations and engagement in order to heal, grow and prosper. Because our default setting is to not have these conversations. We can see it with COVID and vaccines and mandates. I've heard it today with a lot of the struggles our institutions are having, and I know heaps of you on the other end of this lens have those battles in your institution or in your workplace, and the way the structures and the systems are. And, a lot of people don't want to have those conversations, but as the tatau teaches us, we have to lean into those conversations. We've got to have them, because by leaning into it, we can figure out, that we can get through. Because with tatau, you get through. Every session that you think is going to kill you, like at some point you just survive it, and then it's the next one. You come back for the next session. Before you know it, you're on your third session, and you're on your fourth, and things that you couldn't envision being possible, next thing you know, your belly button's done and you got through it. So these difficult conversations a lot of you, all of us are having, whether that's at a family level or an institutional level, public sector, private sector, tatau reminds us that we've got to lean into those painful things that our default setting is to run away from, because that's where we grow and our institutions and our ʻāingas can prosper. So I would like to also extend that to the audience, because each one of you has something at the back of your mind that you don't want to acknowledge, and I share mine not for any shock value or for whatever reason, but I know there might be a Matt out there who also was a wrist slitter back in the day, but they got through. And so, if you've got difficult things that you're avoiding, like I do, and whether it's a small thing or whether it's a huge thing, it's the things that we're running away from. Tatau teaches us that we have to lean into the pain and face them head on and endure them. That is the part of life, and that at some point we will push through the pain threshold and we will survive. And I don't say this lightly, because a lot of people I hear the narrative, tatau is the most painful thing ever. If you think about the au, which is bringing you so much pain, like every day we wake up and painful things happen in our lives that are testing us. And we either run away from them or we lean into the pain, like the tafuna says. And so some of you out there may have felt the au of losing a parent. And, my heart goes out to you, because I have not felt the au yet. I've felt every au in the collection of the Sulu ʻApes, and they brought me a lot of pain, but I am still blessed to have my parents. And Mum and Dad, you're probably watching, I love you very much. But for all those who have, there's people out there who carry the tatau of losing a parent and have pushed through, some who have recently, and that's part of the reason I'm streaming, is because I have seen some colleagues and family members who have just like that lost somebody. And that must be a painful au to accept and lean into. And I don't know when my calling comes, but I would feel really guilty not sharing anything that might help somebody out there through this project, and not only the project, but just me as just Matt, not anonymous. So that concludes the presentation. I just want to also acknowledge Areta, who is here, who's been assisting myself, Low Track, for this presentation. It was really important that we get this artist talk done because of Massey University's involvement as well as the festival, because audience engagement and just sharing what we have, what we know, and 𝒓𝒂𝒎𝒑𝒂𝒖, that's a really critical part of this work. And we never know when our calling comes or when the next au is, what au are we facing tomorrow, and so forth. So it's been a blessing to work on this piece. It's been a blessing to be a recipient of such amazing institutions and organisations that are involved. It's been a real blessing to be the recipient of the local hospitality, the local Wellington village, who have just, hey, you're in our hood, we got you, what do you need? I am very grateful at this moment to be able to stream across time and space and just be the recipient of so much good vibes. So hopefully this talk has kind of given some insights to any fellow creatives, especially our young rangatahi who are coming up, who are already dabbling in Fruity Loops and iMovie and all of that stuff. I've had an amazing time just being a tutu with the equipment and just seeing where it leads. This is a natural extension of it, trying to figure out all this, the live stream switching buzz, but I am grateful for everything that's happening at the moment. This residency comes to a conclusion soon in terms of our location here, and we'll relocate to Auckland and be back at some point to finish up the production. But as of this point, do we have any? We don't have any questions online, do we? Oh, cool. Yeah. How's our time going? Perfect. Oh, sweet. So 8:37, 37Hz 2. Shout out my wife Norma, and everybody that's still tuned in for whatever reason. Like I said, I just want to extend gratitude for being able to broadcast. I'm a son of South Auckland who's privileged to be here in Matairangi, Pukeaho, in Wellington, streaming whatever it is about this cool escapade we are on with creative exploration. And for our fellow creatives out there, keep doing your thing. And to all our institutions that are supporting all our artists, thank you also. Thank you for supporting me, and especially our audiences, because if a tree falls in the woods, as they say, and no one hears it, did it really fall? So this project would, if no one kind of engages with it, whatever. So thank you, everyone. We're about to conclude this live stream, but just want to, across time and space, whenever you view this, whether this be live or you view this later on, I just want to remind you that by leaning into our pain, we will get through. And after the pain comes the healing, and after the healing comes the growth, and from the growth, we find our identity, and that identity is however you make yourself out to be. So that's been my journey from being anonymous to whaiumo. So much love, everyone. 𝒓𝒔𝒕𝒂𝒖 𝑨𝒓𝒕𝒊𝒔𝒕, I feel much to our live stream. Much love to everybody in your ainga. Stay safe out there. Peace.